Welcome back. Well, another project, here we go. Today we have this stair rail with metal. These are all metal that's painted black, and then we have our wood handrail that's screwed in on top. So a couple things we're gonna do today is first we're going to secure the railing. There's some screws underneath here that need to be tightened. You can see it's real loose. And who knows how deep those screws are in there, so we want to make sure someone coming down the stairs is not going to accidentally rip it off and have an accident. So what we're going to do is we're going to be securing these on nice and tight. We're going to be re-sanding and restaining these. I already did some sanding, but you can see they used to look like that, kind of a dark brown color. The other issue is this person had a cat or something in here, and they totally gouged the wood here, so we're going to have to hit it with some thicker sandpaper, maybe 80 grit, and then go up to ultimately go up to about 200 grit, and then that'll be ready for stain. And then the last thing we're going to do is tape off this area and either hit it with the spray paint, or we'll probably just end up hitting it with some really nice thick semi-gloss interior paint, nice high quality paint. So when this is done, it's going to look brand new. So in this case, I could remove these handrails. A couple reasons why I don't want to. I don't want to increase the hole size that's already been screwed into it. The other thing is when I go to sand this, it's just as easy to sand it when it's mounted. You can see when I sand it, it's not going to be moving all around. So sometimes people like to use a palm sander or orbital sander. In this case, this is such a small area. I'm just using some 80 grit just to knock this stain off. Then I'm going to come back with 120 and work my way up to 220. But again, like I mentioned before, there's these strange gouges. I believe they're from her cat. So I'm going to have to knock that down as much as possible. I'm not looking for perfection here. It's just a handrail, but in the end, it might look very similar to the handrail on the opposite side, which is real smooth, stained, and so it's really clean and simple looking. Always try to go with the grain. In this case, I might have to go slightly against the grain, but once you get a few layers off, you get down to the wood pretty quick. All right, I got it sanded to as good as I want to go. So I'm going to use a tack cloth. It's kind of like a sticky cloth that'll get rid of any debris. I'm going to kind of rub that over the wood and kind of make sure there's any sanding dust that was in there. Make sure that's all out. You can see from the rag there was a bunch in there. So you want to get rid of this because when you stain, you don't want your stain adhering to that material that's going to eventually come out. So you want to go right to the wood. So now that we have that done, I always like to use this product Min Wax, and you can pick your stain style. In this case, because it's going to sort of match the floors, it's not going to be exact, and it doesn't need to be. I'm going to use this. It's a small can. You don't need to buy a big can if you're doing a small job. The other thing is you can put a type of wax primer on this. A stain primer that would help the wood absorb your real stain, but in this case, this is a very simple handrail. We don't need to go overboard, so I'm just going to use stain directly, and I'm going to apply it with a rag. A lot of people use a foam brush or even a paintbrush, but I found a rag gives you a lot of control over what you need to do. Okay guys, we're ready to start staining. I did a small test sample and it came out decent. So if you get a chance, always try to do a test sample underneath the wood or on the back side of the wood, just to make sure you're liking the color match. So with this type of product, you can put on pretty much as you want, and you got about 15 minutes before you have to wipe off any excess So if you come on to this panel and you put it on really thick with a brush, you got 15 minutes to wipe it off before it sets in and dries. The thing you want to do is you want to stain the wood. You don't want the stain on top of the wood in layers. So you want it to penetrate the wood, but you don't want it on top of the wood where it's like a paint. It's a stain, it's not a paint. The other thing is, make sure you go with the grain. And this product is really smelly, so you're going to want to have a window open. So in this case, I'm going to dip it in and give it a little run here. And I'm just kind of, not dabbing, but I'm stroking it along. And you can see that grain coming right out. So you can put as many coats on as you want, but normally after you put your first coat on, you want to wait 4 hours before you apply your second coat. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and then we'll take a look. Then the other thing is you have to remember, stain is not a sealant. So you're going to want to put a polyurethane over this, especially on a handrail. So the stain, it's giving its color, but it's not going to protect it. Eventually, when people put their hands on this, it's going to wear off. So you're going to want to put a nice polyurethane on it, which we'll do later. What I'm finding is this has pretty deep gouges in it, and I knew that when I sanded it. I did not want to sand this thing into a toothpick, so I'm really working my stain in to make sure it penetrates everywhere I want to go. It's kind of an advantage to having a brush. I can really work it in. So yeah, the grooves are a little deeper than what I wanted to end up with, but on the other hand, if I went too thin, I would have really compromised the banister. So in the end, when I put the polyurethane on it, it's going to seal it up real nice. So you can see I'm kind of, you can see that excess. That excess can stay on for 15 minutes, and then you're going to have to wipe it off because you don't want that excess drying like a coat of paint. So when you get the color you want to achieve, especially with a rag rather than a brush, you can just stroke it down, pull off any extra stain, and then you're good to go. But it's looking real sharp. It's exactly the color I wanted to get, and pretty much good to go. I hit the second banister too, and it looks good. I just got to hit this top one, and we'll put the polyurethane on after 24 hours. Okay, we've got our railing stained. It came out absolutely perfect, beautiful. Now we're gonna turn our attention to this metal railing. You can see this house is about 50 years old. It's probably never been repainted. So I'm gonna get some, it's called a metal grit sandpaper. It's basically sandpaper, but it's probably a little more durable. And we're gonna hit these, pretty much every surface of this railing, just to make sure it's all clean. Then we're gonna take a tack cloth, wipe it down, and then I'm not spraying, I'm gonna use a brush, and hopefully that comes out good. It should. Also, what would come out good sometimes is if you use a really nice enamel spray paint. But in this case, I don't want to disassemble this structure because it's somewhat complicated with all the angles and mounts and stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and start sanding, and then we'll paint. All right, now we're going to start painting the black metal railing. So I'm using a satin finish. I didn't want to use a flat, and I didn't want to use a semi-gloss just because there's some chipped paint, and if you use semi-gloss, it's going to show up a lot more. And flat would be not as much dramatic as at least the satin will pop a little bit. So let's get started. So I took the time to sand this rail. You can see it's kind of in bad shape, but one coat of paint actually will probably be enough for this, and it'll fill in all those areas fairly well. So again, I'm using a brush to to do this so I have more control. And if you notice when I do this, putting the paint on and I'm coming back with one nice long stroke, because when this dries, you may see some very minor stroke marks. And if you do, you want them going vertically with the post. One thing you don't want to do when you paint anything, but especially this, is, for example, come in here, keep doing this, coming back, doing this, then coming back here, doing this, because what's going to happen, I'm not sure you can see that, but you're going to get these lines, the stroke mark lines, and it could dry like that. When you go over it the first time, it has enough fluidity to it and mass to the paint that it will kind of gel in and these lines won't show up. After you paint the surface, items like this screw here, come back and take a look at that to make sure a drip doesn't occur. Sometimes the paint will gather there, so it's a good idea to check that out. In this case, maybe a small one, so I'm going to hit that.